the radical, fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, welcome everybody. Welcome to the Yaron Brook Show on this Wednesday evening. Thanks for joining us. There's a bunch of booming sounds going on outside as if somebody's, blowing up stuff. Hopefully it's fireworks somewhere because it's Puerto Rico and there's always reason for a party in Puerto Rico and there's always fireworks going off somewhere. But there is repeated boom, boom, boom. I guess it's fireworks. All right, anyway. Let's not get distracted by the fireworks. Adrian wants to go party. Sounds good. Okay, so we got a couple of topics today we're going to be talking about. One is this new organization called American Compass, which I think is a new think tank run by a guy named Aaron Cass, who is Aaron? Aaron used to be in Mitt Romney's campaign and 2012, and is a senior fellow at Manhattan Institute, which is a very famous, well-known think tank in New York. And Aaron has now founded his own think tank called American Compass, and I think it's really important and a real kind of trend within the right. So we will look at them, and we will look at kind of the manifestation, at least, of some of their ideas in the actions of the British Prime Minister recently. So with Boris Johnson's ascent to the Prime Ministership of Great Britain, we'll see the connections there. And then I want to talk about science and government funding. There's a fascinating article in the James Martin Center for Academic Renewal's, website. Fascinating article about science and government funding. And I think it's a crucial topic, crucial issue to be discussing because so much. Anyway, we'll get to talk about government funding of science and how government funding necessarily corrupts the science and why it's really, really bad to have government funding of science, which is my conclusion from the article, not the authors. But let's start with this new phenomena that the organizers are actually calling conservative economics. That is not economics, not good economics, bad economics, not Marxist economics or free market economics, but a different kind of economics, a different kind of approach to looking at economics, a different kind of approach, looking at the world, which they call conservative economics. Now, as we go through this, you'll notice that it's quite familiar because it's a kind of a topic I've been discussing for many months, for a few years now. And that is my expectation of where the right is going to go. That is, with the election of Trump, what are the consequences to the right? And I've said one of the probably the most damaging consequences of the Trump election is the complete decimation of whatever factions within the right believed in free markets to any extent. They're decimated. They're either kicked out of the Republican Party, completely marginalized by the right, or they have folded and completely surrendered and completely retreated into kind of a nationalist view of economics. And I've provided plenty of evidence that is indeed happening. We saw that with that conference last year of the nationalists, of the conservative nationalists. They were focused more on issues like immigration. They were focused more on issues of culture, of social programs, of government's role in regulating morality and instituting certain criteria, moral criteria, into government programs, into government stuff. So conservative nationalism was a big thing last year. And It delved into the realm of economics a little bit by discussing industrial policy and so forth, but that clearly wasn't a focus. The focus was nationalism, immigration, culture, and everything that kind of implies, and the restrictions on our social liberties and our social freedoms. The this new idea of conservative economics is filling in the blanks. It's saying, okay, yes, we need to move towards this conservative nationalism, but don't forget economics. Economics is very crucial. It's very crucial to the family. It's very crucial to society. It's very crucial to communities. And we need to think in terms of the economy as conservatives, not as free marketers. Indeed, what we need to do, the conservative economists now tell us, what we need to do is abandon the idea, the false god of free market economics. We need to abandon the idea of markets, of profit, of freedom, of free trade within the United States and free trade outside of the United States. And we need to look not just at economic efficiency, not just at economic production, not just at maximizing economic success, but we need to look at things like the impact of economic policies on the family, the impact of economic policies on the working class, the impact of economic policies on inequality. Yes, on inequality. The right, now led, I guess, by American Compass, a very influential, brand new think tank established by Cass, now says what we have to do is look very carefully at inequality. Inequality is a real problem they identify, and we need economic policies that take that into account, that take all the social stuff that the left has been telling us, all the social stuff that Tucker has been talking about. And what we need is a new approach to economics that does not just look at the numbers. In its kind of founding editorial in the National Review, Oren Cass writes that American Compass, an organization is dedicated to helping American conservatism recover from its chronic case of market fundamentalism. So the problem we are told with American conservatism, the problem we are told with the American right is that it has been overly dedicated to economic freedom. It has placed economic freedom above all else. And as a consequence, I guess, we got laissez-faire economics in the United States. We just failed. And as a consequence, we need to look for another alternative. Wait. That didn't happen. We never had laissez-faire economics. We've never had free market economics. But what these people are saying is, maybe we've never had it, but the right has always been obsessed by it, focused on it. That would be a shock to Ayn Rand. That would be a shock to those of us who actually consider ourselves capitalist, free marketeers. Conservatives have always held back. Conservatives have always compromised. Conservatives have always emphasized non-economic issues, non-freedom issues in trying to manipulate, maneuver, centrally plan our economy. Conservatives have been the last people to defend free markets, to defend capitalism, to defend true freedom and liberty. And now conservatives are saying, oh no, we went too far. We defended capitalism too much. It is truly insane. It is truly insane to associate free markets with anything conservative. Conservatives abandoned free markets at their birth, the birth of conservatives. William F. Buckley was never a free marketer. The National Review, which published this announcement by American Compass, was never free market. The neoconservatives have never been free market. No version of conservatism has stood for the free market. I mean, Ronald Reagan, who might have given a great talk, a great speech about the virtues of free markets, when he was in power was not a free market president. Indeed, government deficits grew out of control under Ronald Reagan. George Bush, maybe? Was he this free market icon, defender of free markets? Well, no. Regulations was out of control under Bush. We got Sarbanes-Oxley, one of the largest regulatory bills since the Great Depression. It was passed by Bush and a Republican Congress, 99-0. It passed the Senate. I mean, when was this great era of free market economics in the Republican Party or in conservative thinking? Passed over me. I never saw it. Where is this great libertarian, so-called libertarian free market influence on the Republican Party? I don't know. I've never seen it. Now, it is true that most conservative think tanks, most think tanks on the right, present themselves as, oh, we're here to advance the principles of limited government, free enterprise, and individual liberty. And then they propose Obamacare for Mitt Romney in Massachusetts. I'm talking about Heritage. They all talk about free markets, limited government, free enterprise, limited government, individual freedom, but none of them actually live up to that. They're all, almost all of them, are compromises. That's what differentiates conservative from the free market think tanks that are really free market and are not conservative. It's not just on the social issues. But now we are told by the remnants, the parts of the right that are trying to be intellectual while recognizing that Trump has completely shifted the political map, while recognizes that the new constituency that supports the Republican Party is not pro-markets, is not pro-trade, is not pro-liberty, then are telling us that the Republican Party, that the conservative movement has been way too dedicated to market fundamentalism. They're insane. They're lying to us. But this is the story they're telling. Now they, on the other hand, are going to be much more aware of the impact of economic policy on the working class, on inequality, on the family. I mean, they could be from the left. So what they're advocating is what they're calling a conservative approach to economics. They want to prioritize. In economics the traditional structures of family and community that provide the foundations of a flourishing society, or the capacities that a nation must nurture and sustain to remain strong. They say, look, we've done all this economic freedom. Really? Where? What economic freedom? We have capitalism in America today? We have economic freedom today in America? They tell us the consequence of all that economic freedom, consequence of economic freedom, are collapsing families, shuttering communities, stagnating wages, and declining life expectancy. That is the consequence of too much economic freedom. Now, I have to say, these people are dishonest. They know better. They know we do not live in a capitalist society. They know the government regulates everything, right, everything across the board. They know the taxes all over the place, all kinds of taxes. They know that we massively redistribute wealth. And yet, all the problems of the world we have today, all the problems of America we have today, are too much economic freedom. This is what you get from the Trump revolution. This is what you get on the right when you elect Donald Trump. He has basically eviscerated the right. There is no voices on the right anymore, to the extent that they have existed, but there are none now who advocate for actual economic freedom, for actual economic liberty, for actual capitalism, or partial capitalism. Capitalism now is the straw man. Capitalism now is the excuse. Capitalism now is at fault for every problem that we faced. So take, and I've talked about this guy, Senator John Hawley, who is a big supporter of the American Compass and this new approach to conservative economics. And I've talked about Josh Hawley. He is a freshman senator from the state of Missouri, I think. And again, a supporter of American Compass. And he has written recently, quote, "Public philosophy says liberty is all about choosing your own ends." Yep, liberty to a large extent is about choosing your own rational values and having the freedom to pursue them. That's what liberty means. So he writes, "Public philosophy says liberty is all about choosing our own ends." That turns out to be a philosophy for the privileged. For everybody else, those whose life is anchored in family and home and nation, for those who actually want to participate in our democracy, today's philosophy robs them of the liberty that is rightfully theirs. So the right today is more left than the left. The right today, in the name of family, home, and nation, wants to regulate and control our economic lives. But more than that, it wants to regulate and control our values. It wants to tell us that liberty is not about choosing your own ends, not about choosing your own values. Then what is it about? Marco Rubio recently wrote, quote, we have become defenders of the right of business to make a profit, the right of shareholders to receive a return on their investment, and the obligation of people to have to work. But we have neglected the rights of workers to share in the benefits they create for their employer, and the obligation of business to act in the best interest of the workers of the country that have made their success possible. What's the difference now between the left and the right? What's the difference now between Marco Rubio and John Hawley and Sanders? The only difference is that Sanders is honest. He calls what he advocates socialism. Somebody says I'm strawmanning. I'm reading that these are quotes from conservatives. Marco Rubio is a conservative, Tea Party conservative. John Hawley is a rising star within the conservative movement. Where is the strawmanning? These are conservatives. This is published in the National Review, a conservative magazine. I'm reading their words, not my words, their words. Conservative economics, they write, will take seriously the effects of social and market forces on each other. Pernicious effects, the high levels of economic inequality. That's a talking point from the left. Pernicious effects that high levels of economic inequality can have on the social fabric, the market's functioning, and people's well-being, regardless of absolute material living standards. This is strawmanning. This is an exact quote. I'm reading from the words of a conservative writing in the National Review, talking about the evils of inequality, talking about the talking points of Elizabeth Warren, the talking points of Bernie Sanders. They've adopted them. I'm not cherry picking. Go read the article. I'm basically reading you the entire article. Read it. National Review. I'll give you the date. It's called American Compass, Economics with People Included. Article by Oren Cass from Manhattan Institute, conservative institution, published in the National Review, a conservative magazine, quoting John Hawley, Josh Hawley, a Republican from Missouri, considered a conservative, Senator Marco Rubio, a Tea Party conservative. And by the way, I've talked about Marco Rubio. I've showed you video of Marco Rubio. I've showed you video and talked about Josh Hawley. These people are conservatives, and yet they are leftists when it comes to economics. Strawmanning? Stop. the dishonesty, people. Stop defending the indefensible. Stop defending a right that is completely changed, that is completely shifted under Trump to being socialist in its essence from an economic perspective, having abandoned whatever little bit of economic freedom they believed in. Conservative economics, he writes, will also accord equal respect for the conservatives of capital and labor. Where have we heard that before? Rather than claiming that whatever is best for shareholders in the short run, nobody argues that what's best for shareholders in the short run is good. That's a complete misunderstanding of what shareholders are. The people strawmanning are the conservatives. The people strawmanning are the people who claim that all our problems today are a consequence of economic freedom, economic liberty. But that's what these people, these conservatives, are saying. The mission of this American Compass is to establish an American consensus that emphasizes the importance of family, community, and industry to the nation's liberty and prosperity. That is the new conservatism. That is what they're about. You don't believe me? Go read it for yourself. You know, you don't have to. What's interesting, I found, is as I'm reading about this, right? As I'm reading about the new right, this particular form of conservatism, which is heavily associated with the conservative nationalism that I talked about last year, that had a whole conference and has now journals and people arguing and a huge debate within the conservative world. By the way, I'm doing an event in 2 weeks at Clemson University with Andrew Sullivan. And Andrew Sullivan is a Catholic gay conservative who I think very much agrees with many of these points. He's become more and more anti-capitalist over time. And it's going to be fascinating to actually have a conversation with one of these guys. So tune in. It's going to be videotaped. It'll probably be live streamed. It's my conversation with Andrew Sullivan, one of the, a significant voice on the right, a real critic in a good way of Donald Trump, but a compromiser when it comes to certainly economic freedom and economic liberty. But one of the interesting things that happened is as I'm researching this American Compass, I come across an article on Bloomberg. Yeah, Bloomberg, the guy running for president. I come across an article by Bloomberg. This is the title of it. A counter-revolution is brewing in the UK and Europe. And this is the subtitle. Popular enthusiasm for government intervention is upending traditional distinctions between left and right. And that's exactly it. What we're seeing today is that the right is abandoning the free markets. And that's the case that this article makes about the UK. So here's the argument being made. Boris Johnson was elected recently, not only on a platform that committed to Brexit, but also on the platform that committed to massive government spending. Indeed, to a reversal of past conservative governments that have instituted caps, at least to some extent, on government spending. Johnson promised to spend on infrastructure, to massively increase spending on the NHS, to grow government. Indeed, he competed with Jeremy Corbyn on how much government would spend. Now, the problem is that there are people within the conservative government in Great Britain who are more traditionalist free market types. In this case, the leader of that part of the Conservative Party in the UK is a guy named Sajid Javid. And I'm probably mispronouncing those names, but that's his name, Sajid Javid, who was Chancellor of an Exchequer under Boris Johnson, and a well-known Ayn Rand fan. He was a former manage a Deutsche Bank, and a real free marketer, as real as anybody in government these days can be. Somebody who wanted to have controls over spending. Somebody who wanted to rein in government. So Javid was one of the good guys, and he was the Chancellor of the Exchequer, which is basically Treasury Secretary in Boris Johnson's government. And a few days ago, he was unexpectedly fired. And he was unexpectedly fired because he was basically told that his positions on government spending, his positions on the free market, his positions on Thatcherite positions on the role of government were not in line with Boris Johnson. So while I've said positive things about Boris Johnson, it appears here that he wants to roll back the ideology of Thatcher, roll back the ideology of free markets. He believes, Johnson, because I don't think Johnson believes in anything, but he believes, as I think the right in America now believes, that the populist wave that elected Donald Trump, the same populist wave that has given us Brexit, does not want limited government, does not really want free trade, does not want economic freedom, but actually wants a government that actively reduces inequality, that actively reduces profitability among companies, that actively engages in central planning to bring about conservative goals. Goals centered around, as you heard, the family and community and reducing inequality. The working class is what elected Boris Johnson, just as the working class in America is who elected Donald Trump. The working class is not interested in free markets. They're not interested in economic liberty. They are interested in government redistribution, government control, government investment, government spending, government programs, government central planning. They're not concerned about business. They want labor. They want unions. Indeed, you could argue that the left and the right in the UK and in the United States on economic policies, and we saw this when we analyzed some of Tucker's videos, where, for example, Tucker supported Elizabeth Warren, we have seen that the right and left are converging on many economic policies. Hatred of Wall Street, hatred of private equity, hatred of restructuring a business, hatred of markets, hatred of letting markets determine outcomes, hatred, fear of technology. We see this now in England. The Conservative Party under Johnson basically competed with Labour during the election on who would spend more. And indeed, since being elected in this last election, Boris Johnson has nationalized, this is straight out of Corbyn and Bernie Sanders, has nationalized the Northern Rail, one of the railroads in the UK, and has increased public spending and is committed to increasing public spending even more. And Sajid Javid, in the article it says, Sajid Javid, with his tattered copy of The Fountainhead, clearly stood in his boss's and neighbors' way, insisting that Britain should run a balanced budget, God forbid, by 2023. So, the right is completely gone when you think of a right that stands for economic liberty. The right is completely gone when you think of standing up to the left in economic terms. The right and the left have converged in economics, and now what differentiates them are the social issues. Immigration, trans issues, nationalism, Issues like that. Abortion, not really in the UK. But on economics, there is no right. And indeed, if you look at France, and you look at Marie Le Pen, who heads up, the kind of the right-wing party in France, the nationalist, anti-immigration party in France, she is going to run a campaign against Macron, pitting Macron as the free marketer and arguing for more government intervention, for more government control, for more government spending. The right in Europe, across Europe, from Poland to Hungary to Germany to France to the UK, is now a right of economic intervention, is now a right of central planning. This is the trend. I don't know to what extent Trump caused this, probably not. Trump is just a symptom. Trump is part of it. Trump is one of these characters on the right that are basically of the left. So I've been warning about this for a long time. It's coming to pass. It is becoming a reality. It's becoming a reality faster, in a more extensive way, in a broader way than I expected. It's indeed, to me at least, stunning on how quickly it has become just everywhere. This complete taking over of the right by leftist economics. Conservative economics is basically leftist economics with family thrown in. Family and maybe some religion thrown in. All right, we got some super chat questions. Why are both objectivists and conservatives highly skeptical of climate change hysteria? They are almost indistinguishable when discussing the topic. I don't know. I don't know if I doubt that objectivists and conservatives are indistinguishable when discussing the topic. If you listen to Alex Epstein, I think the best spokesman on issues of climate change. I don't think he sounds like a conservative at all. I am skeptical about the climate change hysteria. I've said often that I don't do the science. I don't know the science. I don't have. But what I do know is that the number of people dying from climate-related deaths is declining. That's a fact. Has been declining for a century, and is declining because of the use of cheap fossil fuels in order to shield us from the horrors of weather. I know that human civilization cannot survive without fossil fuels today. I know that if there is such a thing as climate change caused by carbon emission, the only solution technologically, the two solutions technologically are nuclear power and technologies that would suck carbon out of the atmosphere. Environmentalists are against both of those. Therefore, again, I don't trust them. So I don't think those are the kind of claims that conservatives make at all. I think conservatives are much more concerned about, GDP and just distrusting the left and everything else. That's not central to my argument. I will talk a little bit about climate change when I talk about science and politics, so stay tuned. Hey, Yaron, do you think a Sanders presidency would spark a Tea Party type backlash, or is big government conservatism here to stay? Our politics suck. I think big government politics, big government conservatism is here to stay. I think the Tea Party had its day. I think it failed. I think they know they failed. I think they had nothing to offer, and they're gone. And the new coalition is fundamentally a big government coalition, a coalition that wants government intervention, that is anti-free trade, that is anti-immigration, and that is anti-capitalism. So I don't think Sanders would awaken a latent capitalist sense within the American people. I think that's gone. I think the Tea Party was the last. Now, it doesn't mean it can't be built up again, but it's going to take a long time. It's going to take quite a long time before we see a real significant movement on the right that is pro-free market, pro-capitalism. And the only people that can bring that about are objectivists. And it right now is an opportunity because the right is rejecting individualism. The right is rejecting capitalism. We are the only voices out there. We are the only voices out there that are pro-capitalism, that are pro-individualism. And we have an opportunity to make our voices heard. And I think without us, there will be no revival of that view. And I really don't know. Senators like Ben Sasse, who I thought was going to be really good on things like individualism and things like capitalism, is turning out to be, again, a kind of a conservative nationalist, or at least a economic conservative, all this bullshit. I think a lot of, what's his name? Ted Cruz, who was this real Tea Party conservative, supposedly pro-free market and everything like that, is turning out to be anti-capitalism and completely selling out to Donald Trump on populism. So I just don't see who within the conservative movement is going to lead a revival of a Tea Party movement. The Tea Party conservatives are abandoning the ideas of the Tea Party and have been abandoning them. And this, again, is the consequence of a Trump presidency. I don't think you can measure the pros, the plus and minuses of a Trump presidency just on issues of policy X, policy Y. It's how has Trump changed American politics? And he's basically moved the entire political map dramatically to the left. He's made the Republicans leftists and conservatives leftists on economics, and he's made the Democrats socialists, wacky leftists. So he is he's completely distorted the American political scene, and I don't think that'll just go away. I think that is permanent for now. I think, particularly if he wins in November, I think that is permanent. If he loses in November, then there is a chance of some kind of revival on the right of economic liberty. But I don't think Sanders is what will do it, because I think a lot of people on the right will support Sanders on a lot of issues. I think a lot of issues Sanders, is in agreement with Tucker Carlson, is in agreement. I mean, Sanders is anti-immigration, for example. All right. All right. Almost finished the unknown ideal, and I'm up to this very subject: conservative defense, in quotes, of capitalism. So cowardly, it is infuriating. At least the left are open in their evil opposition to the essence of capitalism. Keep fighting your own, one mind at a time. What the thing is about conservatives is they used to pretend to defend capitalism. Now they don't even pretend to defend it. Now they don't even pretend to defend it. So maybe that's a good thing. Maybe that is what leaves it open. Maybe that's what it leaves it open to us to step in. Somebody says, can you comment on Zihan? I don't know Zihan. I'm not sure what you mean by Zihan. I'm obviously missing some important story out there in the news. But I don't know Zihan. Peter Zihan? I don't know. I can look it up if it's important, but I don't know what Zihan is. Sorry. If you write maybe in the comments something about what this is, then maybe I can Peter Zian, but I don't know, what do you want me to comment about him? I don't know anything about him. So I can look him up. I opened him. I'll put him up on the screen. Maybe for next show, I'll check out a video of his or a talk of his and see if there's anything for me to comment about. Can you speak a bit about the role of intuition in objectivism? I often find that my gut feeling is actually very reliable in life. Yeah, often, but not always. So what I call intuition, or what you call intuition or gut feeling, there have been books written about that call this fast thinking, which I think it is a good example. It's an it's you automating certain thinking processes, particularly in areas where you are an expert. So it's automating the thinking in your area of expertise. So for example, a violinist doesn't think about playing the violin. They just play it. In a sense, that's intuition. An art expert can look at a painting and almost immediately tell you, without explicitly, consciously thinking about it, oh yeah, that's a Rembrandt. No, it's not a Rembrandt. Almost immediately, because he's automatized all the steps necessary, and it can happen super fast. Your gut feeling, your intuition, to the extent that it's rational, is based on that kind of fast thinking. It's an automatized process, something you have already automatized, that then you apply to a particular issue. An issue that you're an expert in. Because if you're not an expert in, then you haven't done the thinking to justify having an intuition about it. So it's a product of extensive work, extensive thinking, extensive analysis. Let me just comment on something on the Super Chat. Somebody says Leonard Peikoff is skeptical of open borders. So let's be very clear on what Leonard Peikoff's position is. Leonard Peikoff's position is that in a free market, borders should be open. He is pro-immigration in a free market, in a laissez-faire capitalist world. America, in a laissez-faire capitalist America. The world doesn't have to be. I disagree with Leonard, and Leonard, we have disagreed, and we have actually debated, where Leonard argues that in the world we live in today, primarily for political reasons, immigration is bad and harmful. I think he's wrong. You can hear the debate. It's public. It's online. You can hear it. I think it was on a podcast. It was on Amy Peikoff moderated it, so it's up there and available. And you can view it. So we disagree. We've debated it, and that's fine. We remain friends even though we disagreed about it. But don't misrepresent Leonard's views. Somebody asked, did you ever watch Firing Line, William F. Buckley's show? Do you think it provided any real value to public discourse? Yeah, it was a good discourse. It was a good discussion. But Buckley undercut it all, because Buckley was a smug, aristocratic snob who looked down his nose at anybody, and you didn't actually have a debate. And he would, his arguments, particularly in favor of capitalism, were so weak, were so pathetic, were so compromising, that no wonder if the leading intellectual light of conservatives was so pathetic, then I don't know how much value he provided to them. By the way, with regard to Muslims, Leonard Peikoff did not say they would be bad even in a free market. He said it would be bad in a free market as long as there was a war that they were engaged against us. But he recognized and he agreed with me that in a true laissez-faire free world, the threat that Islam represents to the West would be crushed in something like 2 to 3 weeks. and post-crushing and eliminating the Islamist threat to the U.S., there would be no problem with Muslim immigration. It's the crushing that is missing. And if you go back and you listen to talks like Americans versus America that Leonard Peikoff gave, or Q&As that I did with Leonard Peikoff, where we both answer questions about the post-9/11 world, you can see that Leonard agrees with my position on foreign policy in terms of what needs to be done to the Muslim world and what effect that would have on the world. So again, stop misrepresenting Leonard's views. I mean, Leonard disagrees with me, I acknowledge that, but be accurate in terms of how you present his disagreement with me. Don't misrepresent it. Now, you're also misrepresenting my views, so I guess it's par for the course. You're just a troll misrepresenting and lying about the positions of, people who actually know what they're talking about when you don't. All right, let us move on to the second topic I want to talk about. So I came across this article, and I'm basically going to read a bunch of this article to you because I think it's so good and so powerful. And it relates to this issue with regard to the fact that government today does almost all scientific funding. So funding today in academia is almost, science today in academia is almost all funded by government. Now, this is an article called The Intellectual and Moral Decline in Academic Research, and I highly recommend it. It's been published by the James G. Martin Center for Academic Renewal. The author is, let me just find the author. The author is a man named Edward Archer, and it is truly fantastic. Truly fantastic. All right, so he starts off by citing Eisenhower's presidential farewell address in 1961. And in this address, Eisenhower warned that the pursuit of government grants would have a corrupting influence on the scientific community. He feared that while American university, and I'm reading from the article, were, quote, historically the foundation of free ideas and scientific discovery, that the pursuit of taxpayer monies would become, quote, a substitute for intellectual curiosity and lead to, quote, domination of the nation's scholars by federal employment and the power of money. And that was an amazing statement by Eisenhower, a president I don't have much respect for generally. But this is truly a powerful and I think true statement by Eisenhower. And it's played out absolutely correctly. As the author notes, the relentless pursuit of taxpayer funding has eliminated curiosity, basic competence, and scientific integrity in many fields. Now think about it. Most of the concern today of scientists is getting that government grant. It's figuring out what will trigger the government bureaucrat who approves the grant. It's making sure that whatever you're doing fits in with the agenda of the government agency that is giving the grant. Gone are the days of trying to do breakthrough science, trying to think outside of the box, trying to do something new, interesting, risky. Because the government's not going to fund any of that. The government can only fund what is in a box, what is understandable to the bureaucrat, what is understandable to the specifics, the specific organization that is approving the grant. Who, by the way, did I not answer? I've answered everybody. There are two questions in the funnel waiting to be answered. I would get to them, but I try to answer everybody, so I don't understand I'm in the middle of something. I'm not going to answer a super chat question while I'm in the middle of something. I'll get to it when I finish this topic. So there's constant obsession about grant writing, about how to write a grant, how to appeal to the particular interest of the particular bureaucrat at the particular government agency. Critical thinking, methodological rigor, science are gone, are irrelevant. What we train graduate students today, people who are teachers' assistants, what we train them is in writing grants. They're not trained in doing science. They're trained in getting money. So this particular author is an expert in food. And he talks about public health research. It says from 1970 until 2010, taxpayer funding for public health research increased 700%. You wonder why we have a deficit. 700%. And yet, the number of papers in academic journals, papers that were funded with taxpayer money, that have been retracted from those academic journals because they were shown to be fraudulent, inaccurate, unrepeatable, has gone up by 900%. So here you have a situation where the trolls are out in mass today. It's pretty amazing. So I'm sorry I have to stop because I have to eliminate the ability of this idiot to write on the chat, because otherwise it just becomes impossible for the people on there. 900% increase in the number of research articles that have to be retracted from 1970 to 2010 in public health research. Much of that due to what's called misconduct. Fraud and retractions have increased so much from 2010 to 2015 that private foundations, private funders of science, have actually created the Center for Scientific Integrity to check up on these scientists, and Retraction Watch, a group that basically goes out there and notices the retractions and alerts the public about scientific knowledge that is spread widely that then is retracted as non-knowledge. Now, it has to be non-government institutions that do this, because the universities are in the pockets of both the people asking for funding and of the government. Universities don't hold their faculty accountable. They don't hold the faculty accountable for fraud. They don't hold the faculty accountable for misconduct. They don't hold the faculty accountable for sloppy research, for bad research, but even for actual fraud, known actual fraud. They don't hold them accountable. And the scientists know this. Over 14% of researchers report that their colleagues commit fraud, which means they lie. And 72% report some other questionable practices. 72% of scientists believe their colleagues engage in questionable practices in their science. And we're talking about the best universities in the world. We're talking about Duke University, the 8th largest recipient of NIH funding at $475 million. NIH is the National Institute for Health. Government money, taxpayer money. And yet, a whistleblower at Duke alleged that $200 million in grants were obtained using falsified data. They made up the data to get the grant. They have 50 papers are being retracted from work funded by the NIH. I mean, it truly is stunning, the numbers this guy is revealing. and this should really, really piss you off, really, really concern you. Harvard, which is the wealthiest university in the world, received almost $600 million in public funds from the National Institute of Health and other agencies in just 2018. Some faculty, well, these funds, they could pay tuition, room, board, and books for every undergraduate at Harvard, right? And yet the faculty has an ever-increasing number of retractions due to misconduct or incompetence. In one case, Harvard's teaching hospital was forced to pay $10 million because its faculty had fraudulently obtained NIH funding. Of course, the penalty is only a fraction of the grants they actually get. Cornell has constantly had to investigate researchers who receive millions of dollars from the Department of Agriculture, for example. The author claims that academic research is often conducted for no other reason than to give physicians and researchers qualifications for promotion or tenure. So it's not truth-seeking. It's grant-seeking, tenure-seeking, promotion-seeking. And if you combine that with sheer incompetence, what we get is studies that tell us that eggs are good for us, and then eggs are bad for us, that coffee causes cancer, and then coffee extends life. If you follow diets and if you follow food research, you know that the research is pathetic in its inconsistency, that study after study cannot be replicated, that study after study gives us no valuable information about how to actually live our lives. Now, I think this applies to climate change, not global warming. I mean, the fact is that all climate change studies are funded by, almost all of them are funded by the government. To get money, if you're a climatologist or if you're in the field, the only way to get money from the government, the only way to do research is to do it on climate change. And if you produce results that say it's not catastrophic, it's not a problem, it's nothing to worry about, you're not going to get your funds renewed. So it's a self-perpetuating type idea. Good news does not warrant more money. Bad news does. So there's a massive incentive to produce bad news. There's a massive incentive to produce news that the government wants to hear. There's a massive incentive to produce what the bureaucrats want you to produce. And what, of course, that results in is in a politicization, complete influence of politics over science. And people say, well, the scientists believe that the globe is warming. But I say, I don't trust scientists anymore. Because science is being politicized, not only on the issue of climate change, on the issue of food, on the issue of climate change, and on many, many other issues. Anything that relates to public policy, I don't trust the scientists. Because they've been corrupted by politics. Now, what is the solution to this? Now, the author of this article, unfortunately, gives 3 very lame solutions. I won't bore you with them. There's only one solution to it. And it's to advocate for real capitalism. Somebody on the Super Chat said, I can't believe he said Ted Cruz doesn't believe in capitalism. Yeah, he doesn't. Because capitalism is the complete separation of state from economics. But in this case, capitalism means the complete separation of state from science. The only way to stop this corruption is to eliminate the funding of science by government. Let's privatize science. Let's completely privatize the funding of science. Let's take the billions and billions and billions of dollars that go to the NIH, that go to all these research institutions, that go to all these universities, and let's return them to taxpayers. Let's eliminate them from the federal budget and from state budgets if the states do this, to the extent that they do this. What we need is a constitutional amendment that separates science from state, that prohibits the government from getting involved in science, from prohibiting the government from funding any scientific pursuits. Until we have that, we are doomed to continue on the spiral of ever more corruption in the field of science. And it truly is sad, because science is the fountainhead of the Enlightenment. It was the scientific revolution that led to the Enlightenment and ultimately the political revolution and to capitalism. It is science that is in our culture representative of reason, representative of fact, representative of rationality and reality. If science is corrupt, we can't trust scientists, then we truly cannot trust anybody. So I think this idea that government corrupts science is so, the beauty of this article is it documents so well and so thoroughly. And we know, and there have been other studies that have shown, that the number of scientific papers where experiments are described that can be recreated is shrinking dramatically. And that should really scare you. The decline of science might be the most scary thing happening in the world today. All right. So somebody asked, do you think it was a good sign that Trump lost the popular vote so significantly? No, because I don't think the popular vote is that important. The fact is that if you were running to maximize the popular vote, you would run a completely different campaign. And it's not clear to me that Trump would lose a popular vote campaign. For example, I think a lot of Trump supporters in California won't vote for Trump because there's no point, because California is left. So California is dominantly left, and the people just don't go to vote. The same in New York, the same in other solidly Democratic states. So I'm just not sure that it would make that much difference. It's generally a good sign that there's opposition to Trump, but remember where the opposition is coming from mostly from people like Bernie Sanders on the left and Elizabeth Warren and people who support them. Therefore, people who are just as bad as Trump. Will Mike Bloomberg govern as a more free market president than Trump? Does he have a real shot at beating him? I don't know. I think on balance, he'd probably govern on balance from about the same position as Trump. I think he'd be better than Trump on trade. I think he'd be worse than Trump on some regulations and better than Trump on other regulations. I think he'd probably be better than Trump on government spending. I think he'd be worse than Trump on taxes. Although I don't think he'd do much on taxes. So, I don't think the primary problem with Trump is the way he governs the economy. I think it's really bad, but I think there are other issues with Trump that are far more substantial than that. It's the whole mode in which he operates, which is really, really bad, and his pragmatism, his disregard for truth, his nationalism, his anti-immigration, I mean, the viciousness of his anti-immigration, the main thing is just his complete and utter disregard for facts and the truth. And then, of course, the issue of trade, I think, is a big deal. I don't think it's a little deal. I think it's a big deal. Let's see. Would cutting down the role of the middleman, insurance companies, in healthcare lower the cost? Maybe, but I don't think the issue is cost. Who cares? I mean, not giving people healthcare would lower the cost. I think what would really actually improve healthcare and improve access to healthcare and improve the results of healthcare is not cutting out insurance companies, which I think would be a disaster. I mean, cutting out insurance companies would basically leave the government funding all healthcare, which basically would bring about a dramatic and drastic deterioration in the quality of healthcare that we receive. The solution is the opposite. The solution is to liberate insurance companies. And by the way, insurance companies are not middlemen. They're insurance companies. You don't think of car insurance as a middleman. You don't think of home insurance as a middleman. They serve a function of reducing your risk of needing funds in an emergency to cover particular costs. And they do this by pooling risk. It's a massively beneficial, productive, important, crucial function in an economy. I don't believe it should be cut. I believe the opposite. I believe it should be liberated. All the various millions of regulations on insurance companies at the state level and at the federal level should be immediately repealed, should be immediately eliminated. Indeed, the federal government should issue a law that basically said all state regulations on insurance companies are null and void. And the insurance industry should be free to offer whatever products it wants at whatever prices it wants to whomever it wants. And when that happens, costs will go down and quality will skyrocket. And I'm less concerned about cost, much more concerned about quality. Could a solution to a problem be purposefully withheld because they don't want to lose funding? Yes, absolutely. And that's part of the problem. That they will distort facts, they will lie about the information, they will lie about the study, they will lie about their regressions, they will manipulate the data. And it's what Thomas Piketty did on inequality. It's what many economists do in order to prove their points. And in economics is full of this, and it's even worse in things like health science, in things like environmental science, in things that require government funding. And it's very, very, very dangerous. Again, we didn't get many Super Chat questions, and the Super Chat didn't seem to be particularly, or the chat didn't seem particularly interested in the topic. But I can think of a more important topic right now than the corruption of science by government in our age. Gian Nicolini asks if I've seen the movie Whiplash. Yes, I have. I actually talked about Whiplash yesterday when I did my review of the movie Parasite. Whiplash, the theme of Whiplash is excellence demands dedicated, focused, uncompromised hard work, single-minded focus. And that is a good theme. It's an excellent theme. And it's a great movie in the sense that I think it illustrates that theme beautifully and very, very well. It's very well acted. It's very well directed. And it's one of my favorite movies of the last 10 years. And it's an excellent, excellent movie. All right. Good. Thanks, everybody. I hope you enjoyed the show today. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. If you really enjoyed it, please share it. The only way we grow this show is by you sharing. And of course, if you want to support the efforts that I make to bring these articles to you, to comment on the events of the day, then please support the show. Support Value for Value by supporting it on financially. You can do so on yaronbrookshow.com/support. You can do so on Patreon, Yaron Brook Show, and on subscribestar.com/Yaron Brook Show. So Thank you, everybody. Enjoy. We will break up this show today into at least, I think, 2 episodes. One focusing on the conservative economists, and a second on focusing on the corruption of science. So you'll have another opportunity to listen to it all. Bye, everybody. Thanks a lot. See you